Hello and good evening, CSI258 Section 847 students for the second 8-week term in the spring 2015 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This evening's Packet Tracer tutorial is going to be once again another skills integration challenge for Chapter 5, where we're going to go ahead and take, from the looks of it, pretty much all of the knowledge we've acquired so far throughout the course, to include our frame relay and point-to-point encapsulation configurations, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into the activity here. So we're going to be doing all kinds of VLANs and trunking. So all devices in the topology except admin and admin switch, and I'm looking for those right now. There we go. So here's admin and admin switch, and IT support are fully configured. So you do not have to access the other routers. So we're simply going to be taking care of admin switch, admin, and then probably doing some work on the IT support. So let's go ahead and jump in here. So it says configure remote management access, including IP addressing and SSH on admin switch. So let's go ahead and bring the switch up. And these skills integration challenges are some of the best activities because they give you sort of a real-world scenario that you've got to deal with here. So we're going to go from user exec mode to privilege exec with the enable command, and then into global config. And it says management access, including IP addressing. So let's see. Admin switch, it should be on VLAN 60. And that's going to be our IP address. So I'm going to say do show VLAN brief. Let's see if that's configured. And let's stretch it even a little further here. So is VLAN 60, I'm sorry, not do show, or yeah, we're there, right, okay. So yeah, so VLAN 60 is not configured yet. So I'm going to go ahead and say VLAN 60, and then we're going to name VLAN 60 management. And I'm going to exit out, and so now we'll say do show VLAN brief one more time here. And there's our management VLAN. So we're going to go ahead and throw an IP address on here. So interface VLAN 60. IP address is going to be the IP that we have in our table here. And now this is going to be the IP that we use to connect to the switch in order to perform in-band management, right? So this is in-band management because we are connecting to an SVI that's configured on the switch. Out-of-band management would be if this was a 3750X Cisco switch that has a fast Ethernet port on the back that you cannot actually route traffic through. It's just a management interface that you could hook into a management network. So we're going to say IP address 10.10.10.146, and does it give us, let's see here, it should be .240. Okay, so I was just looking for the net mask information there. So we're going to say 255, 255, 255, 240. And we're going to go ahead and hit enter. So we've configured the VLAN 60 as well as the IP address. So that's the remote management access. So what we're also going to do, and they may or may not be asking for this, they typically want that IP default gateway statement. So we're going to go ahead and enter that in. And this is an interesting question. I had a coworker check with me yesterday regarding the IP default gateway statement and what exactly it does. And so remember, the IP default gateway statement, and let me get out of the interface config mode. So the IP default gateway statement, this is for traffic that is being generated by the switch, control plane traffic. So if I'm doing a ping or a trace route and I'm generating the traffic on the switch, that is what this command is going to affect. So we're going to look at admin, and for VLAN 60 it looks like the IP is going to be 10.10.10.145. And so for control plane traffic, again, traffic that I'm generating on the switch. Now this is different from data plane traffic. Data plane traffic is the traffic, if we look here, Data plane traffic would be the traffic that's coming from the IT support workstation through the switch, right? Or the file server traffic going through the switch. That is data plane. And that is very different from control plane. Because if you think about it, the control plane traffic on the switch, let's compare and contrast how the PCs here, or the file server, and the PC. On the PC, when you configure your IP, you put your net mask in there, and you also put in your default gateway, right? Well, it's very much the same on the switch. We work on the PC. We need the PC to be able to get off of its local network segment, which is probably going to be the 10.10.10.144. So we need it to get off its local segment. The switch is the same way. If I'm on the switch, right, and I'm running a ping command and I'm trying to ping out here to this web server, let's say, when I run that ping command, that is control plane traffic that's going to be associated with my management VLAN, and I need to be able to tell the switch, hey, if this is not on the local network in which you have your management interface, here's the default gateway that you can go to so that that ping or that trace route can be forwarded to the router, the default gateway, and then the router can handle the routing of the packet. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, because sometimes the confusion is, and with the colleague I have, the confusion was that the IP default gateway statement is actually the statement that you put on the switch it's going to route the traffic for you that's going through the switch, and that's not the case. Remember, traffic going through the switch is data plane traffic that's being generated by, as we just saw, the file server, the IT support PC. Control plane traffic is being generated on the switch, and it's typically management type traffic. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put the default gateway statement in there. Let's see if we get a point or two for that, and we do. So they clearly wanted that. Whether they ask for that down here or not, I'm not sure, but that's typically something they're always looking for. So configure remote management access, including IP addressing and SSH. We've kind of taken care of the IP addressing component. Now let's knock out the SSH configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and this is not going to work, but let's take a look. Remember, we have an order of operations concern here. When if I say crypto key generate RSA and I hit enter, it's going to come back and tell me you need to have the domain name configured first. Now, they conveniently help us out here. So IP domain name, and we are going to use cisco.com. All right, so now we need to configure RSH. Let's see, it wants a crypto key generate RSA, and the key length, you can see 512 is the low end, or actually 512 is the default, sorry. 360 is the low end, 2048 is the high end. It's asking for 1024. All right, and it wants, let me make sure we get this here. It wants the crypto key length 1024 IP SSH version 2, right? Limited to 2 authentication attempts. So IP SSH authentication retries, we're going to say 2, and then a 60-second, I'll back this up here, a timeout of 60 seconds. And if I do a question mark, it's the SSH timeout interval in seconds. And so we'll put the 60 in there, and it gave us the point for that. So clear text password should be encrypted, so we know that that's going to be service password encryption, right? Now, you'll notice I skipped over the user admin with password letmein. Let's go ahead and configure that user now. Let's pay close attention here to make sure that we use a secret password, because my guess is that's what they're asking for. So I'm going to go ahead and say username admin, and you can see I can type in password or I can type in secret. So let's create it with a secret, and this is going to be an unencrypted entry that I give it here, let me in. And do we get any points for that? It doesn't appear that we're going to get points for that. So let's pull that back. And they don't actually tell you, so username admin, and we'll just simply say password let me in. So we're at 11 points, and let's see if this is what they're looking for. All right, so it did not assist us on the point there. So we'll continue to drive on here, and we may have to come back. I'm going to make a quick note here to the side to take a look at the username to see if it's going to give us that point or not. All right. So the next step, configure, name, and assign VLANs. Ports should be manually configured as access ports. So we have our table right up here, right? And here are the port assignments. So let's go ahead and say VLAN 15. The name of that VLAN is going to be servers. And then I'm going to say VLAN 30. And the name of the VLAN is going to be PCs. And then we've got VLAN 45. And the name of that VLAN will be native. And then we've already done VLAN 60, so we are good to go there. All right, so let's go ahead and do our port assignments. I'm going to exit out here. So from global config, I'm going to grab a range of ports. So we're going to say interface range FA 0/11 through 20. And it's saying that the ports should be manually configured as access ports. So switch port mode access and switch port access VLAN 15, which is the server's VLAN. So we're going to go ahead and configure that. Now let's move on to our next range. Interface range FA 0/1 to 10, and the same thing. Switch port mode access and switch port access VLAN 30 for the PCs. So the PCs are in VLAN 30. Now, gig 11, my guess is that is going to be the trunk port that we have heading up to the admin router. And so let's make sure that's going to end up being a trunk port with a native VLAN of 45. So I'm going to say interface gig 11. Excuse me. And you'll see that I don't think initially it asks us port should be manually configured. Configure trunking. Okay, so it's just basically says configure trunking. It's expecting us to know, and gig 11 is not an interface. All right, so let's say do show IP interface brief. We get to do a little troubleshooting here. So again, and this has happened a couple times on some of the activities we've done where the port assignment that we're being given has said gig 11 when in fact it's gig 01, right? So we definitely want to pay attention to this here. So what we're going to go ahead and do, I'm going to make a quick note up here, but first let me clear the screen. So this is going to be gig 01, right? Not gig 11. There is no gig 11 on our switch. So we'll work with gig 01, and we'll find out right away here if that is in fact the port that's been configured to basically provide us our uplink, which is going to do the router on a stick for the admin router. So I'm going to say no shut, and what we're looking for here are these going to go green, or initially they may go orange and then green, and it did not. Is there a, make sure I saw everything. So we'll say shut do show IP interface brief. Oh, it may be shut on the other end as well. So let's say no shut, and the admin router. I want to sort this out right now. So the admin router interface. All right, let's jump on the admin router here. This is making it a little, gave us the wrong port number, and now it's shut down on both ends. So let's go ahead, let's check this out here. All right, so we're going to go from user exec to privilege exec with the enable command, and then into global config. And I'm going to say do show IP interface brief, and gig 00 and 01 are both administratively down. So let's go ahead and say interface gig 00 no shut and see if anything happens. Whoops, no shut. And there we go. So it looks like we're going to be using that gig 00 interface on the admin router. And we're going to go back to the admin switch here because, and there we go. And it does show that the interface has changed its state to up. So we know we've got the right port. We know that it is gig 01. So I'll leave the screen there so it shows that it's crossed out. We're dealing with gig 01. Okay, and we're on the switch, and this is where we're going to say switch port mode trunk. And you can see that the VLAN 60, which is our management VLAN, has changed to up. And we want to say switch port trunk native VLAN 45. And let's see, do show run. Let's take a look here at, gotta go all the way to the bottom. Take a look at gig 01. So switch port trunk native VLAN 45, switch port mode trunk, and we've also shut the, no-shut the port and brought it up, so it looks good for right now. So implement port security. All right, so on FA01, and I'm going to go ahead and say interface FA01, allow 2 MAC addresses that are automatically added to the configuration file when detected. So what's the first thing we need to do with port security? Remember, the first thing we need to do is turn it on. So we have to issue the switch port security command. If we don't issue that command and then issue all the other commands, none of the other commands are actually going to take effect. So once we've got that, we know that we want the switch port security. If we do a question mark here, we can see that maximum, right, max secure addresses is going to be 2, because it says allow 2 MAC addresses that are automatically added to the configuration file. So the maximum is going to be 2, and then switch port security MAC address. How are they automatically added? Well, we can manually we can manually add them in here with the 48-bit MAC address, or we can say sticky, which is going to automatically detect them, and they're going to be added to the configuration. Now, the port should not be disabled. Remember, by default, if I don't type anything with respect to the violation for the port security here, if I don't say anything about the violation, if I do the MAC address, I do the maximum, what is the violation mode? And if you said shutdown, you're correct. So it would automatically shut down. However, we're being told here that the port should not be disabled, but a syslog message should be captured if a violation occurs. Well, where does that leave us then? Whoops, I did not mean to do that. Where does that leave us then? We know it can't be shut down. We're being told that it shouldn't be. So we've got 2 choices here, protect and restrict. And so remember, the only difference between protect and restrict is that protect does not signal a syslog message, but restrict will. So switch port security, violation, restrict. And we should go from 26 points up to, there it is, 27 points. All right, so what else do we have here? Okay, then it says disable all other unused ports. Now, remember, we're on admin switch here. So we've got a file server plugged in, we've got the IT support PC plugged in, and then we've got this gig 01 connection here. So there are 3 ports that are going to be left in an up and up state. And let me do show IP interface brief. Let's see which ports are up right now. So we just got done dealing with Fast Ethernet 01, and so from 1 to 10 we've got the PCs. From 11 to 20, let's take a look at 11. So it looks like 11 is going to be the port for interface FA011. I'm going to say shut. Yep. So I wanted to see this go red. I want to confirm that that is in port 11. So then we'll just say no shut. We'll bring that port back up. So we've got FA01, and I'm going to make a little note of this to the side here. So FA01, FA011, and then we already know gig 01. So at this point, and I'm going to leave that where it is, let's go ahead and drop in our range. So interface range FA02 to 10, comma, FA012 to, and it should be the next port is 24. let me see how many ports we had. I believe we had 24 ports on this switch. Oops, there we go. Yeah, so it went up to 24 and then gig 02. And then comma GI 0/2. And that's a pretty big range, right? But that's exactly what we're looking for. And so I'm going to say shut, and it's literally going to shut down every port on the switch with the exception of those 3 ports that we're using. And as you can see, they are still lit up green. So if I were to say do show IP interface brief. All right, so we'll check back up here. 01 is obviously up, but administratively down on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 is up. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, and then gig 02. Even VLAN 1 is administratively down. So we've knocked out all of the ports. Okay. Where are we at here? Configure name and assign the VLANs. We did that. The trunking is done. The port security is done. We disabled everything else. So it looks like we're going to go ahead and transition here. And let me go ahead and clear the writing from the screen. All right, so we're going to transition, to the admin router, right? And this is probably where we're going to get into a little NAT. Let's see what else we've got going on here. I'm kind of surprised that I don't see any PPP or frame relay. Yeah, I don't see much of anything here. So let's go ahead and jump in on the admin router and let's see what they're going to have us do. This might not actually test us with some of the recent things we've picked up here. So it's a little odd. Okay, so we're on the admin router and we're going to configure Inter-VLAN routing. And so that's code for router on a stick. And we know that it's the gig 00 interface. So let's go ahead and make sure I'm on the gig 00 dot. Let's roll back up here, make sure we get these right. 00.15. And remember, we've got an order of operations concern here. So if I tried to put in IP address 10.10.10.161 and 255, 255, 255, 224, and I hit enter, you can see that it's going to give me an error because it knows I'm creating a sub interface. And so it needs to know the encapsulation. So remember, we need to put incap.1q, and then what's the VLAN ID going to be? Well, for subinterface 15, it would be 15, at which point we can then come back and assign the IP address. And so now let's walk through this for each of the subinterfaces. And int gig 30, oh, sorry about that. Whoops, 0.30. All right, and the incap.1q30, and we're going to say IP address is going to be 10.10.10.193, and the subnet mask is going to be 255, 255, 255, 192. All right, so then we've got interface GI 0/0.45. And the incap again is going to be .1q with the VLAN tag of 45. And we're going to say IP address 10.10.10.129. And this is going to be 240. And they've certainly, they're exercising a wide range of subnet masks here. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. And actually, let me walk that back. Incap.145, and remember, 45 is the native VLAN. So we're going to tag that native keyword on there, and you can see it just clicked up a point. So that's definitely something we want to make sure we get on there. And then we're going to say 0/0.60. Let's get our encapsulation statement on there. .1q60. And then IP address, and this is the default gateway for the control plane traffic on the switch, and this is going to be, where are we at here, 10.10.10.145, and this is 240, is that correct? 60, 240, yep. All right. So we've got those interfaces are all configured for the Inter-VLAN routing, and let's say do show IP interface brief. All right, so the serial interfaces are also configured. It looks like our connection to the internet is configured. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's look here real quick and see what our next step is. So Inter-VLAN routing, we should be good to go. Our trunk link is configured and everything. So configure DHCP services for VLAN 30. Use LAN as the case-sensitive name for the pool. So you can see that it's kind of a wide open statement there. It doesn't tell you, are you going to provide any kind of additional configuration information. So it just says configure DHCP. So one of the first things we know for VLAN 30 is we're going to have to exclude that address because that address is already being used. So we're going to say IP DHCP excluded address 10.10.10.193, and we're going to do that there. So then IP DHCP pool, let's create our pool here, and then we've got the pool name, which I've already forgotten. It's just simply LAN. And it didn't actually tell us to configure any of this stuff, right? So let's go ahead, and we're going to obviously have to go out on a limb here. You got to think that they're going to want the default router. So that's going to be 10.10.10.193. That's the address we excluded. And let's see if we go from 43 to 45. All right, good. So look, one of the default router, there is not a DNS server listed here. So the web server's there, the outside host is there. I don't see a DNS server. And obviously we want to have the network statement, right? So it wants the network number in dotted decimal. So that's going to be 10.10.10.192. Now remember, we also have to add the network mask in. So let's roll back up here, and our mask is actually provided for us. So 255, it's a /26, which means we're borrowing the first 2 bits of the host space, and that's the value of 128 and 64 to give us 192. So we should bump from 45 up to 48. No DHCP options are going to be created here. So for the DHCP config, that should be everything. All right, configure on VLAN 30, use LAN as a case-sensitive name for the pool. All right, implement routing. Okay, so here we go. So let's get into some OSPF routing. So I'm going to exit out here and say router OSPF 1 because it wants us to use that process ID. The first thing we're going to set is the router ID. So the router ID is just simply 1.1.1.1. Configure one network statement for the entire 10.10.10 address space. Well, that'll be pretty straightforward. They actually give us the they give us the statement there. So it's 10.10.10.0. Now this is not a net mask. Remember, this is going to be a wildcard mask. It's the inverse of the net mask. So it's going to be 0.0.0.255. And what area do they want us to participate in? And it's got to be area 0. And disable interfaces, it should not say. Yeah, it's got to be area 0. So let's put area 0 in here. Let's see if we go from 49. There, well, we've got the neighbor adjacency before we got the points. So we're looking good there. So the neighbor adjacency is there. So do show IP OSPF neighbors. And there we go. And it looks like site 2 and let's see. Well, actually, you can't really tell. I guess site 5 could be 2.2.2.2. 10.10.118/30. Yeah. So it's going to be over on that segment. So it's either site 2 or site 5. So we'll figure that out in a second. It's at that serial 000 interface. So we've got our adjacency established with OSPF. So disable interfaces that should not send OSPF messages. Well, there's only really one interface. It's that gig 00 interface. However, remember that we have the sub interfaces configured. So I'm going to say passive interface gigabit Ethernet 0.0, I'm sorry, 0/0.15. And let's see if we go from 51 to anything. No, so we'll say 15, 30, 45, and 60, right? So we're going to passive all of the interfaces the sub-interfaces that we created on the router. Okay. So let's make sure here, disable interfaces. Disable interfaces, it should not say. So it's just passive. Configure a default route to the internet. So for us to get to the internet, we're going to be going to the 209.165.202.136. Now, again, this is a very wide open statement here. Configure a default route to the internet. Well, it doesn't actually tell us. Do I just give it the exit interface? Do I give it the next hop IP? Or do I fully qualify it? So we're probably going to have to enter a couple things in here if we don't get it right off the bat. So for the default route, it's IP route, and then we do our quad zeros, meaning anything, and this is going to match anything that doesn't have a longer, more specific match. And I'm just going to go ahead and actually what we're going to do first, I need to take a look at do show IP interface brief. I can't remember the serial 010. So, oh, you know what? And router OSPF 1. So passive interface serial 010. Because we want to make sure, well, actually that's not, yeah, that's not in the 10 network, so actually we don't need that. Apologize about that. Okay, so let's get back to where we were, and what we're going to do here is we're going to configure that default route. We're going to use the exit interface, since it's a point-to-point interface, serial 010, and let's see if it likes that, and it does. So it wanted that exit interface there for the default route. Okay, so now this is some, finally here, we're getting into some of the recent topics that we just covered, implementing NAT. So it says configure a standard one-statement ACL number 1. So we're going to say access list 1 permit, and it says all IP addresses belonging to the 10.10.10/20.0/24 address space should be allowed. So this is pretty straightforward. 10.10.10.0, and then we're going to put our wildcard mask in here. Right, should be allowed. It says refer to your documentation and configure static NAT for the file server. So let's drag this over here. So here is our file server. There's our inside global, I'm sorry, inside local, and here is my inside global address. So for static NAT, I'm going to say IP NAT inside source. So what is the inside source going to be? Is it going to be a pool, or is it going to refer to an ACL that's tied to a pool, or is it going to be static? Well, we know here that it's going to be static. So then my inside local IP is 10.10.10.162, and then it's going to want my inside global IP, which is going to be 198.133.219.130. And that is it. Static NAT, again, static NAT is very straightforward. We've got 54 points, and this should actually bump us up a little bit here to 56. All right, so the static NAT translation has been taken care of. Let me slide this over here, and let's take another look. Actually, I can chew up some more space here, give us a little more real estate. All right, so configure one standard ACL. We did that. Refer to the documentation for the file server. We got the points for that. So configure dynamic NAT with PAT. So NAT overload, right, is what we're doing, and that's NAT overload is referred to as PAT. Very rarely do I hear fellow colleagues in the engineering and the networking field say, oh, I'm doing dynamic NAT with PAT. Typically people just say PAT because that means that you're doing NAT overload, right? So you'll just hear them say, oh, we're patting. Okay, so use a pool name of our choice, a /30 mask, and these two public addresses. So we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to pick these out, right, of the larger space that we're using, the 198.133. All right, so let's go ahead and do the first step, which is going to be, we've already got the access list, so we're going to use that same access list. that we just created in the first step here. So now we can go ahead and say IPNAT pool, and remember, it's asking us we can create any name, so I'm just going to say NAT underscore pool. We'll try to keep it simple. So here we go. It wants the starting address, so I'm going to say 198.133.219.1, make sure I get that, 198.133.219.128, and then the ending address is going to be 198.133.219.129. Is that right? Let me double check that. All right, and then the net mask, it says, let's make sure, a /30 mask and those two public addresses. All right, so the net mask is going to be 255, 255, 252, and I'm going to hit enter, right? So we've got the pool, we've got the access list. Now we need to pull those two together, right? Or associate the access list with the pool, or vice versa. It depends on how you're looking at it. So I'm going to say IP NAT inside source. Now remember, for the static we said static, however here it's going to be list. What is the access list? And we know that the number for that is 1, and we'll use the question mark here. The pool was NAT underscore pool, and this is the single configuration difference between dynamic NAT, right, where you have a pool, and NAT overload, aka PAT, port address translation. And as soon as I say overload, we have now just configured a PAT pool that has multiple addresses. And remember, you can use a pool of addresses with PAT. There's nothing wrong with that, because all that means is you're giving yourself more available ports. And if you think about it, you've got 65,000 plus TCP ports, 65,000 plus UDP ports. So with 2 addresses, you simply double the number of ports that are going to be available to you. And I'll put the overload keyword in there, and let's see if, and did I call it NAT pool? Let me make sure, because it did not. NAT underscore pool overload. Okay, because it did not like, or at least it didn't respond with any points for that configuration. So let's go ahead now, and we need to configure our interfaces. Do show IP interface brief for NAT. So we know that the serial 000 and 001 are going to be inside interfaces. So IP NAT inside, and then interface serial 010, I'm sorry, serial 001, IP NAT inside. And we also know that the gig 00 sub interfaces are also going to be IP NAT inside interfaces. So interface gigabit 0/0.15 IP NAT inside. And let's see if it liked that. It did. So we're going to drop back here and say 30 IP NAT inside, and then 45 and IP NAT inside, and then 60 IP NAT inside. So we've now configured the IP NAT inside command on the interfaces that would be doing or that we would look to be able to NAT for. All right, so that includes all of those interfaces. Let me go ahead and say end, and let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So we're at 62 out of 70. Let me confirm. Verify IT support has received full addressing from admin. So we'll pull up the IT support PC VLAN 30, which should be doing, DHCP. So you can see we're going to go static. We're going to flip that. It's requesting its IP, and outstanding. So it has picked up its IP address. It's got its default gateway. So we're going to close that out. Verification. All devices should now be able to ping all other devices. If not, troubleshoot your configurations to isolate and solve problems. So then they give us some tests. As you can see here, looks like we're light a few points. So let's check results. Take a look at the assessment items. And all right, so on the admin router, we've got to do the main interface. The NAT on serial 010 it didn't like, and the username, VT, of course, the VTY logins. Okay, so overlook that. So this should be pretty straightforward. So we'll knock out the first thing here. And again, sometimes it's tough to read between the lines with what Cisco's asking you for. So we're going to go to the switch, we're going to go to global config, and I'm going to say line VTY 0 to 15, and it's going to be transport input SSH is what I believe that they're looking for there, and then login local is what I also believe they're looking for, because we've created the local username account. Okay, and then on the admin router, we wanted to go to global config int gig 00 and say, or actually I apologize, we wanted to go to router OSPF 1, and we're going to say passive interface gig 00. And so it was also looking for that. And then I actually forgot, I know the username, the NAT mode on serial 010, which should have been IPNAT inside. Did I not type that properly? Let's take a look here. Do show run interface serial 01. I put it, you know what? Actually, oh, I forgot to put, it's not IPNAT inside I'm concerned about. I forgot to put my interface serial 010 IPNAT outside, right? Because we need the inside declarations, but just as important is that outside declaration. Now, I had a student, one of my best students, contact me this evening saying that he got stuck at 69 out of 70 and could not figure out a way around the username, that it was simply just not giving him credit for the username. So I'm going to say write memory here and show run, and let's take, and actually, did I just go right by it? I did not. Okay, good. So we're looking for that user, or did we? Actually, I apologize. Need to get on that right device, I guess. Okay, so let's confirm that that is the single outstanding issue, and it is. It's on the admin switch. The username is incorrect, and it says the component is part of the SSH configuration. So the username is incorrect. All right, well, let's go back. Let's take a look at that, and let's see if we can't squeeze that last point out of the activity. And that was one of the first things we had to do. So user admin password let me in, and that's on the switch. So let's save our switch config here, and we're going to say show run, and there it is. So username admin privilege 1 password, a type 7 password, admin's capitalized ADMIN. So let's go ahead. I'm going to scroll this up so we can see it right there. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. So let's go ahead. We'll play with this a little bit and see if we can't figure out, there may be something that's looking for that we are not doing. And I tried the secret. So if I were to say username admin and then secret let me in, LETMEIN. Let's see if it likes that. And we tried this before, I'm pretty sure, and it did not like that. So let's say show run. Whoops, do show run. And there's the type 5 password, and it doesn't like that. So let's pull that out. And this is definitely the command, username admin, and then we'll say password, and I'll try the 0, let me in. And there's nothing else we can put there. Let's see what happens there. So we'll say do show run, and the privilege is 1. So I'm wondering if I pull this out, let's type in username admin and I'm going to put the privilege in as 0, and then say password 0, let me in. And let's see if it wanted the privilege to be 0. Doesn't look like it. It doesn't like that either. So we'll pull this back. And again, this may be a bug, but we're going to see if we can't figure out what it's looking for here. So let's see, username, I'm going to try a lowercase a, admin, password, let me in. And maybe it was looking for a lowercase a. No, definitely not. So we'll go ahead and say no. And how about username, admin? What other options do we have? What about privilege 0, secret 0, let me in? Let's see if that might be what it was looking for. No, it doesn't like that either. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull that back, and we're going to pull this out. I'm going to save the config on the switch. And you guessed it, I'm going to reload the switch. Let's make sure. So user admin with password let me in. Okay. All right, let's get back in here. So we're back up to the 69. We're going to go from user exec to privilege exec to global config. And we're going to start this again here. So we're going to say username admin password let me in. Let's see if our reload assisted us at all. It did not. And so we've tried just about every possibility here, except the right one. So username admin secret let me in. Let's see if it was looking for that. No, it doesn't like that either. So let's pull this back. Whoops. So we'll pull this back, and we'll say last few attempts here. Username admin, password. And what if the password's Cisco? What if it's not let me in? Let's see if it's that. No, it's definitely not that either. Let's take a look here and see. It's pretty straightforward. User admin, password, let me in. That is the only thing it's not giving us points for, is the username. That's interesting. And it's part of our SSH config. All right, I'm going to pause for a second here and think about this and see, toy with it a little bit and see if I can't figure out why it won't give us that final point. So I'm going to pause and I will be right back. Okay, I've tried a couple of things and nothing is working. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reset the activity and I'm going to configure that first to see if I can get the point. So obviously this is going to wipe everything out, but that's okay. And we've just reset the activity. Whoops. Just reset the activity. Let me drop this over here to the side. And it's interesting because it starts up with 1 out of 70, right? And I'm using Packet Tracer version 6.2, and I'm wondering if maybe it's an issue. And take a look here. It looks like the IP addresses have also changed. So let's hop on the switch straight away. And we're in the CLI here, and so immediately I'm going to go to global config and say username admin password let me in. We've already got 1 out of 70. When I hit enter, does it give us any points at all? It does not. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to close this down completely. And that I'm using Packet Tracer version 6.2. Let's pull up Packet Tracer version 6.1. That's 6.2. Let me dig up 6.1 here, and I'm wondering if it might not be an issue with, let's see, packet tracer, if this will show me the two different options here. And I know packet tracer, and my VM is kind of running a little slow. As you can see, it's a little behind. Ah, it's not what we wanted. All right, let me get packet tracer 6.1 up here. And this is dragging. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to pause here real quickly, and when I get packet tracer version 6.1 up, let me pause the recording, and I get the packet tracer back up, I'll pull the activity up in 6.1 and let's see what happens. So I'll pause right here. Alright, so we're back, and I actually was able to run down version 6.111.0001. So this is the version I had before version 2. So let's check it out and let's see what happens here. Let me make that a little smaller because we're going to need to see the instruction screen. And let's see what happens when we open this activity up in packet tracer version 6.1.1 as opposed to 258, and this is 5412 Skills Integration Challenge. Alright, so now we got the 10 dot addresses back here. Let's go ahead and username admin, password let me in. So I'm not even going to enlarge the screen yet until I see what happens here. So as you can see, interesting again, it says completion 1 out of 70. We haven't done anything yet. So let's find out when I go to global config and I type in username, admin, password, let me in. Does it give us any points at all? And it immediately does. So this is definitely a bug with packet tracer version 6.2. In fact, let me put up here on the screen the exact version of packet tracer, the 6.2 train that I have that I'm running. My packet tracer 6.2 is 6.2.0.00, and this may be the only one that's out, but that is the version that I was using where this is a bug and it will not give me points for it. My packet tracer version here, when I do the help and the about, is version 6.1.1.001. So again, the packet tracer version that I was doing the tutorial with, which is the 6.2, this is a bug, or it would not, even after resetting it and did just about everything I could. And you can tell here, we entered it in and immediately it bumped us up to 2 points out of 70. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here because again, we've seen every configuration step with the exception of this last configuration step, which was a bug due to the 6200052 packet tracer code. All right, well, this wraps up packet tracer activity 5.4.1.2, and unfortunately the bug kind of stole the enjoyment from the packet tracer a little bit there. So hopefully you have a better understanding of setting up the NAT, setting up the OSPF. Again, we did the router on a stick. I would have liked to have seen some frame relay in here, in addition to some PPP, HDLC, CHAP authentication, maybe some PAP authentication, but that'll probably have to wait for a later skills integration challenge. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on Saturday.